Welcome to All Right in Sin City, a podcast about writers and writing in the Windsor-Detroit region. Your podcasters today are
Irene Moore Davis, author, educator, and local historian.
Sarah Jarvis, former bookseller, publishing rep, and literary festival chair.
and me, Kim Conklin, Windsor-based writer and filmmaker.
My name is Sarah Jarvis, and I am the president of the board of Literary Arts Windsor. It's an honor to welcome you here today. It's the 21st BookFest Festival de Livre Windsor. So before we get started with this program, it's important for us to share what this land means to us. The Literary Arts Windsor acknowledges that our organization and the festival are based on the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nation, which includes the Ojibwa, Odawa, and the Potawatomi. We respect the long-standing relationships with First Nations people in this place, in the 100-mile Windsor-Essex Peninsula and Les Détroits of Detroit. We're so proud to have continued to bring this wonderful annual Festival of Literary Arts to Windsor-Essex without interruption for over 20 years. We were virtual for 2 years, so happy to be back. We're together again in person to share a literary festival that presents an amazing and diverse group of authors. Our charitable organization, Literary Arts Windsor, particularly wants to recognize especially Canadian Heritage, Ontario Arts Council, Canada Council for the Arts, the University of Windsor, and so many more supporters, and you for making these events possible. I'd now like to introduce you to our moderator for this event, the wonderful poet, Windsor poet, Dorothy Mahoney. Woo!
Thank you so much. So I would be really remiss if I didn't mention that a very big poet in Windsor passed away recently, Len Gasparini. George Eliot Clark called him the Canuck beat poet, and I just really wanted to acknowledge that. I think of one poem, I Was a Poet for the Mafia, which I just think is hilarious. The typewriter is gunmetal gray. His books are on the wanted list. And here's my segue, of course. From the poem, he says, I forget the actual number of editors slumped on desks, pumped full of poems. So I'm happy to say that our three poets have all been editors, and they can probably tell us a little bit about murder by poetry. I'm really, really excited to be here and introduce to you Luke and David and Sarah. And right now, the motto for BookFest is across the city, but really it's across the country because Luke is from Halifax and Sarah and David are from Vancouver. So here they are in Windsor with Windsor publishers. So Luke was published by Biblioasis and David and Sarah by Palimpsest Press. So that's pretty exciting in itself. So what we'll do is we'll have them read a poem each so that you can hear their voices. Then we'll have a discussion, and then I will ask them to read some more. But I want to tell you a little bit more about them. The more I read through them, the more I found that they're all very similar in that they all deal with identity. They all deal with love. And remarkably, they all have very strong images of water. So, how lucky could you be to find three books that fit together so well? They really should come as a set. So I would encourage you to think about that when you approach the book table. So let me just tell you a little bit more about them. They've all been editors of a variety of things. Luke is also a teacher of creative writing at St. Mary's University. Sarah also teaches periodically at UBC. They've all had awards. Luke's Years, Months, and Days was named the New York Times Best Poetry Book in 2018. David's Mythical Man, which is also over there, won the Austin Clarke Prize in Literary Excellence. Sarah has been longlisted and shortlisted for the CBC Poetry Prize, and her book, Sweet Devilry, won the Gerald Lampert Award. So, pretty amazing crowd of poets we have here. I guess that's the plural, right? Is it? A glimmer of poets. Even better. Even better. So one more thing before I have them read. Well, there's just so much. But in Luke's bio, he says he has been a mute fish in the sea. And David, in one of his poems, says, when seawater meets fresh water in the ocean, a boundary forms. And Sarah, when explaining why poetry is important, it's like offering a glass of salt water and expecting them to imagine the ocean. Yeah, so that's what you're in for. So I think we'll just go C to C, and we'll start with Luke, and he's going to project.
Sicut cervus desiderat ad fontes aquarum. Water, they say, is taught by thirst. Thirst has worn the path that winds uphill to the well where I went as I thought for my water, and where I met you first. I met you there, and now I know that thirst is also taught by water.
This one's called Same Ocean. Years after being asked, "Where are you from?" I realized that I should have answered, "Did you know that when seawater meets fresh water in the ocean, a boundary forms between them?" Though they appear to not be mixing, it does happen, slowly and over time, two bodies, two places of belonging coming together. Despite efforts to keep us apart, to manifest an individual way of being, the parts that make up who we are, in a sense, are part of the same ocean. There is no other way to think about this metaphor. Only a grandfather who rigged his boat with a tractor engine to give the family a better life, speeding across water with a few belongings, carrying an ocean's worth of culture that's filtered down generationally. When asked where I'm from, again, I'd say that a man once dreamed of more before turning his gaze towards the ocean, where two different bodies of water met and blended until he made landfall, attempting to walk forward, knowing that his existence was forever bound to two places.
I'm still kind of buzzing after Ronaldo's talk, so I switched what poem I was going to read. So this poem is called Wellness Check. We're just here for a chat. Talk with your hands up. Talk with the bodies of your brethren rotting in your mouth. Talk to the black hole of my standard issue. Talk with your mouth full of carpet. Everyone loves a man in uniform. Here my uniform marches in ahead of me, full of Kevlar confidence. My shirt is made of 100 count stop and frisk cotton. My wife cleans it with OxyClean because nothing gets whites whiter. I'm just standing here, trying to help, trying to do my job. If I say I see the same monsters you do, who gets to aim my taser? I'm not dragging you, I'm escorting you to the car. Remember how your mother used to slide her hand over the night gloss of your hair before bed? Why is your hair so limp in my fist? I'll smooth it with my boot. I get 1,000 calls a day. Every door holds a monster. Every window is broken. Every dark corner is an unending maze. Target practice is a black silhouette. Can we come in? Is this your house? Is this your car? Is this your skin? Is this your heart beating like a hummingbird's wings? Is this a picture of your father? Is this your blood? I'm here to help. You need to calm down. I took a week-long course in de-escalation. The coffee was stale and the air conditioning rattled like my mother's lungs before she died. Look, I'm making eye contact. I'm listening to whatever it is you're saying. I'm not actually touching my holster. I'm just hovering above it. I'm smiling. Ma'am, we need you to calm down. Your daughter learned to fly, that's all.
Wow. So we begin. I think there are probably all kinds of questions that you are already thinking, and I want to just kind of step back for a minute and just look at the books themselves, because they are such wonderful creations. So would you mind just talking about the titles and maybe the covers, just as an introduction to the book? So, Luke, are you okay to start?
Sure. There's a lovely watercolor that appears on the cover of this book, and it's by a very by a visionary artist named John Claytor, who lives in Mi'kma'ki, where I live and work at present. And I think that this is a book that could only be spoken in my voice, because it is about a kind of transformation that's very personal. But I've always avoided autobiography in my work, and I had sort of complex feelings about being the body in which these words would come to birth. And so I wanted an image on the cover of the book that was me and not me. And John did a beautiful thing. He took a photograph of me walking on the beach in Port Greville on the Bay of Fundy. And then he just took all the colors of the landscape and he put them inside the figure, and I thought that was perfect. My book is titled The Affirmations, which I suppose is meant to talk about a way of approaching the divine. There's an ancient mystical tradition in the kind of Judeo-Christian world in which I was educated, which says that the soul can make approach to the divine in these kind of two distinct ways, a kind of binary conception, with which we might make quarrel. But one of these ways is the way of negation, which says we have to sort of divorce ourselves from all earthly loves in order to make approach to the divine. But then there's also another way, which is the way of affirmation, in which we see the divine in all things and we embrace all earthly loves as a way of drawing close. And I think that I wanted my book to be a step upon that way.
So I am a very image-based poet writer. That's the one thing that I enjoy writing in that space of imagery. So when Mythical Man came out, my first book, it was a very sharp book. He was very sexy. He was very, very sharp, and kind of the themes were very just heavy around race, sexuality, gender, and all those complications between. So I wanted that cover to be very kind of bold, and so that's why we came up with this one, kind of wrapped in snakeskin for him. But after a while, I felt that book being very heavy, and I wanted something lighter for the next book and to have it be more playful. And so I looked towards my kind of the realm that I play in is with animals and water. I have an affinity for water. I have water creatures tattooed all over my body, and I looked to that for the second cover to have a betta fish on the cover because I think the fins are quite beautiful. And it really invokes this kind of like dreamy quality of the poems and kind of moving away from mythical men where it was stating this is who I am and these are the struggles that, being a gay Asian man go through. But then Dreaming of the Water, I wanted to just kind of be free of those. And that's where kind of that metaphorical play came in of being water, as dreaming of me is water, as in dreaming of me is kind of anything that I want it to be. So yeah, it just really came together well, and I'm glad that it kind of resonates with what the poems create in their kind of stark imagery that I find stark and pretty. I like to write pretty poems, and like to have my books look pretty. So yeah.
This is really fascinating to me because I'm not good at any of that stuff. So I actually had two different titles. I was like, okay, I'm going to call this book The Power of Casseroles or You Can't See Me, It's Dark. And my friend Sadiqa was like, those are terrible. You will never sell a book like that. So she was like, I'll name your book. So she came up with Grappling Hook, which is like stolen from Thomas Transformer in one of my poems. And then for the cover, Amy was like, what do you want on the cover? I was like, I don't know. I'm not a graphic designer. So she was like, okay, and sent me a bunch of covers. And then I picked the brightest, prettiest one. So I didn't realize there was so much thought that was supposed to go into these things.
She was the easiest author to work.
So maybe we should just jump to what water means to you, because we've got you walking by the river, then the river is frozen. We've got dreams of water with octopus, and Godzilla even gets in there at one point. And you've also got the glosas with, of course, Thomas Transformer. So maybe we could start with you, Sarah, and just give us a little glimpse into your significance of water in your work.
Again, that's a really good question. I'm not sure. I guess water always comes up as an image in a lot of poems, not just us three, because we use it every day. It's so relatable. But at the same time, like the ocean is one of our last truly unexplored places. We know more about the moon than we do about what exists in the ocean. And I find that really fascinating. And it's also terrifying because, the ice caps are melting and it seems like we don't really have a grip on what we're doing with the ocean. So I think, I think water just keeps coming up and up again because it's so fundamental to life. And so it just weaves its way in.
I think for me, going with water, again, like I've said, I've always had an affinity to being in water, close to the water, but in relation to this book, it suggested a really malleability, malleableness, what's the word? I'm making that up. It's very malleable, and the way it kind of easily, for me, it was easy enough to kind of relate that to dreams, in that the way, we say dreams, flow into reality, or vice versa, and also what Sarah was talking about, how we don't know a lot about the bottom of the ocean, and same goes to how much we don't know about the human brain and where dreams come from, why some people remember their dreams and why some people don't. I never remember my dreams, which is ironic. but it was just a nice entryway into exploring, one, the ocean, which I love, and animals, which I love, especially sea creatures, but also using it as a metaphor of ways of being, water being the source of life. We're like 90% water. It just made sense to make water another avenue to explore identity and the potentials and mysteries of it.
Yeah, I grew up by a river. I think one of the first sort of grown-up books that I ever read, by which I mean a book that had sex in it, was Margaret Lawrence's The Diviners. And there's this image in it of this river that's flowing two ways because the current is going one way, but when the wind blows across the surface, it creates this illusion, which is also real, and the sense that two things that seem to be mutually contradictory can be simultaneously true is, I think, very important to me. It goes right to the heart of my trans identity, but it also just seems to me to be a great thing about the condition of being in the world. And so I think water is a place to be with that. And at the time that I was writing this book, in some sense I think I'd gone east to the ocean to be reborn, in ways I barely understood. But the kind of amniotic character of water for those of us who are born in wombs is it's important, and I think it comes back at moments in life when we want to be reborn.
Well, we could just keep talking and talking, but I know you probably want to hear a few more poems. So, David, I'm going to ask you to read another one, and then maybe we'll go Sarah, Luke, David, Sarah, Luke, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. So, like I've said before, there's a lot of animals in this book. One of the animals I wanted to write about were eels. I read an interesting book about eels and freshwater eels and their biology, but I didn't really know how to put it into a poem. But the images of eels really just kept sticking with me, and this is kind of what happened. And I'll show you the poem itself. I managed to make it look kind of like wavy, like an eel and water. So this is eels. I get out of bed and cough, eels into the bathroom sink. Baby eels squirm out of bloodshot eyes. I see eels, when showering, writhing in water that falls off my body. Eels are caught in the cotton while I towel off. Eels are stirred into tea I sip, and my tongue is an eel. Eels squirm down my throat where they become words. I keep smashing eels into the keyboard to get them out of my mind, but I still feel them eeling through the grooves of my brain like yesterday, because yesterday was an eel, and my dream a moray biting my hand and pulling me into its second set of eely jaws.
Okay, this is completely different and has nothing to do with water. It's called His True Self. The writer, on a stage, told us his children couldn't be happy unless he wrote, thereby exposing them to his true self. The women in the room quietly passed around the side eye like a platter of cucumber sandwiches. What an asshole, you might think. But his true self paints eyes on the blind and floats like an angel above the dishes and the too tight shoes and the half can of baked beans growing mold in the refrigerator and the top that exposes the beginnings of breasts in your 12-year-old, and you don't want to slut shame her and she's comfortable in it and the school will call you about it later, you know. His true self wakes at 6:30 every morning for his writing practice, because it takes discipline to step over the dog shit in the hallway and pass the toy truck lying prone on the stairs, and to not look at the calendar, which is rapidly running, sprinting really, towards the end of the month, and there's maybe not enough money for swim lessons unless the city subsidy comes through, but that's for kids in grade 9, and she's only in grade 8 this year, isn't she? His true self, who is not an asshole, thinks deeply about Derrida and the ethics of reading, and his true self writes poems that are so beautiful. He feeds them to his children, and they open their mouths like birds, and their bones shine through their skin. So luminous and whole is their happiness.
All right, this is, in a different but parallel way, a parenting poem, and it's called Lullaby. The wind blows where it listeth, the bank swallows out to sea. They return to the cliff face. Foxhole, bird's nest, where you lay your head, my breast. The earth lets slip its fox kits to go mousing in the field. They'll return here by darkness. Foxhole, bird's nest, where you lay your head, my breast.
I think one of the recurring themes in this book is like kind of uncertainties and fears, mainly because like I said, I wanted to write away from my identity in terms of race, racism, and being gay. So this poem kind of embodies the whole fear aspect of the book and uncertainty. It's called Autobiography as a Thunderstorm. Listen to how quiet I am after admitting that I'm afraid of thunderstorms. It's hard to discern hail from the rain smacking the window while I lie in bed thinking of my mom mentioning that my fear of rain came from a past life where I died as a soldier fighting during a storm, unable to tell the difference between bullets and hail hitting metal as I lost blood. I can't fall asleep, so I head to the couch debating if listening to thunder by Imagine Dragons is too on the nose for tonight. I recall telling you that I love windstorms, but only during the daytime, and imagine dragons responsible for them when they take flight, creating gusts to remind us that they still exist. I'm glad you indulge my theory, and yes, a vast imagination is one thing I'm glad flows in my family. A boom is struck, brightening my living room with a flash. The window sounds close to shattering. Wind howls and hail moves bullet-like against the glass. Memory may not be generous for a second time if I carry too much of myself into the next life.
Okay, so my book deals a lot with parenting and gender. So this one is a glossa, which is a poetic form where you take like 4 lines from somebody else and you put them at the end, and there's a whole bunch of rules, and you just have to trust me that I did all the rules because I'm a stickler for rules. So the 4 lines at the beginning are from Richard Harrison, and the lines are, with the same tight mouth, and the young man and my son and I, all born helpless in order to become men, the way birds are born naked. So the poem is called In Order to Become Men. My son brandishes a sword at me, and we pretend to cut each other down, bloodless. He's already mastered the art of a stoic face as I lop off his arm. Now you say, I win, and if you want, you can say it in girl language. As if gender were geography, north and south, and we didn't all speak the same clean tongue of violence. My son, we are the same throughout, with the same tight mouth, the same clenched heart, a fist holding its only coin. My combatives class is filled with men, paratroopers, prison guards, and cops who have to secure their handguns before class. I'm the only poet, but I get the same high. Once, after I was knocked down, the young instructor slung his arm round my neck, grounding his knuckle into my hair. We were sweat-slick and laughing and bleeding, and it was enough that I had tried. And the young man and my son and I knew in our bones that violence is a kind of fire that can solder men together or temper in the body like a blade. What is it to raise a boy? I do want him to feel that power, to be knocked down and raised up again by his brothers, to limp away, having spent every cell of his blood's rush. My son, the poetry of it is the moment on your back, the knowledge of us once again, all born helpless in order to become men, and it is a miracle to become at all. Did I ever tell you about your father? How when he was 19, walking me home, both of us drunk, he brought me to his house and took my hands while I cried about my father, who was dying. He held my grief like it was sacred, and I saw then what kind of a man he would be. Tenderness shot through his bones like marrow, like flight in a hatchling awakened, the way birds are born naked.
It's such a privilege to be able to talk about gender and parenting with you. So this is another poem like that. It's also about queerness and seals. And I'd like to acknowledge a good friend of mine, Daniel Cabena, who gave me tunes for many of the poems in my book, including this one. I was well past childbearing years, and children had, though only 3, when I was walking on the strand, and a sea gray selkie said to me. Oh, come away, my beautiful one. Arise and come away with me. I am a man upon the land. I am a silky in the sea. Oh, how can I away with you? A man I have and children 3. If you had come when I was young, I would have gone away with thee. So I went home to my husband true, and bounced my babies on my knee. But my dreams were full of the Selkie's song, and the Ailey, Ailey of the sea. So I went down to the shore again, and said, all right, I'll go with thee. Come up and claim what is thine own. No answer came from the seal gray sea. So I went home to my husband true, and sang to my beautiful children 3. I am a woman on the land. I am a Selkie in the sea. Oh, come away, my beautiful one. Oh, why hast thou forsaken me?
So this might be a really good time to ask Luke a little bit about the music, because he also mentors, and I know I'm not going to say this right, and I know this word, but as it always happens, he mentors librettists.
Librettists,
yes, librettists, which for those of you probably already know, but are longer kind of operatic works. And so as I read your book, I could hear a musicality to it. But then afterwards, when I read somewhere that there was an audiobook that actually has some of the music as you're reading it, I was a little bit disappointed. And so I was very excited to hear you read. And it was just so wonderful. So I know that you like to weave different art forms into your writing, and I wondered if you could speak a little bit to that.
I think I'm just a person in love, you know. I love being in the fields where meaning is made, you know, and those fields are marvelous and vast and full of artists, painters, builders, cooks, you know, children, and musicians, singers, and I mean, making art is a form of communion, binds us to one another, like wrestling, is it in your poem? It's a way of being with our fellow humans that's very intimate and profound, you know.
So what do you say to somebody who's just starting out writing operas? Like, how do you help them?
I think that, in fact, I mentor nobody, but music mentors us all. I mean, I've had the pleasure of being part of a kind of matchmaking program that's run by the Amadeus Choir in Toronto, where they bring together composers and librettists. I work with my colleague Andrew Balfour, who's a composer who mentors the composers, and I sort of nominally mentor the poets. But really, I think it's a matter of getting out of the way and letting music and language talk to everybody, and then letting the humans in the room make work together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah. It really is quite delightful to hear you read. So I have a question for you, David, because I found it very interesting in looking at your second book that you have companion pieces that match pieces in your first book. And so I thought, how interesting. It's like a continuation, where often I think of a second book as something completely different. And so I wondered if you could speak a little bit to companion pieces and your process of writing.
So I think for me, when I write poetry, they're more like kind of short stories for me. My narrators are characters that I come up with in my head, or from imagery. And I'm always just a fan of kind of expanding the world that I build in small poems. And it seemed to make sense for me to kind of continue what was established in Mythical Men, but in a different direction. So that was kind of my way of stepping away from what was discussed in Mythical Men, while still kind of honoring it and acknowledging that without it, Dream of Me as Water wouldn't have been born. It was also fun for me to kind of do that, because in Mythical Men there are poems that are kind of first-person narratives, and they're talking to somebody. One of the poems in Mythical Men is about the narrator who creates a man from the dead parts of animals. So he wears the skin of cuttlefish, and he has the tongue of a viper and all that. But then in Dream of Me as Water, I wanted to look at that poem, but from the perspective of the creation. So the poem in Mythical Man is called Wild Spell. And then Dream of Me as Water, very cleverly titled. The companion poem is A Wilder Spell. And it's just an explanation of what was from the creature that was created from that poem in Dream of Me as Water. And of course, they don't touch on the themes that were touched on Mythical Men, having to do with like race and being gay. It's just more of meditations on the possibilities of what else is out there for an individual that has been given what they have, or what they've been born with. And so it's just fun to kind of build on those kind of characters that I come up with.
Now, Sarah is also a children's book writer, and she has eight children's books. I know that there aren't any at a book table, and I was very disappointed myself, because one of the books is called Flock of Shoes, and it's about a girl who doesn't want to stop wearing her sandals once it gets cold, and suddenly the shoes migrate, which I thought was so interesting. So I'm wondering how you kind of compartmentalize your writing. Like, are you writing poetry and then something sparks you to think of a plot for a children's book, or like how does that process evolve?
Great question, thanks. I find they're pretty different, because with poetry, I feel like you need to feel ambivalent about something, and poetry is more about, you have a question, you're just trying to kind of like work it through for yourself. Like often, like my husband says I'm dead inside because I don't have emotions, and so like when I write poetry, it helps me, because then I'm like, oh, I was feeling something. So that's like where poetry helps me. But with kids' books, they're funny because they either work or they don't. Like I have 8 published, but I have a million unsellable children's books, and you can't edit them in the way that you can a poem, where it's like a question that you can like ask over and over again. And I feel like with a children's book, the one limitation is they kind of have to have a bit of an uplift. You can't have a thoroughly depressing children's book. And I have learned this from experience, because I write all of these like super dark children's books, and the publishers are like, are you kidding me with this? Like, why are you sending me about a tractor with a farm accident? Anyway, if there's any children's publishers here, I have a great story about a tractor who gets morbidly depressed after a farm accident. So it's just kind of like subject matter based, I find.
Well, I think we have time for each of them to read one more. So whoever's ready, just jump in, because I could sit here all afternoon and just listen to the three of you read, and we have to be a little mindful of the time.
All right, I'll begin. Having flipped my mental pages already. This poem is called Frost. If not a poem, then perhaps some darkened glass to interpose between the one whose mortal cold illuminates your breath and you who illuminates the cold. I got me flowers to strew thy way. I got me boughs of many a tree. But thou wast up by break of day, illuminating all this speech. The sun arising in the east, and fire flowers opened there and bloomed and died, and the glass was clear.
I'm going to read from Mythical Man. So in the book, it's divided into 4 sections, and they each contain a poem called Mythical Man, and each one kind of interrogates and explores a different facet of manhood and masculinity and companionship. This one is my favorite, I think, Mythical Man. It's Mythical Man 2. We press against each other so hard that I should just admit I want to be absorbed into you. Our atoms amalgamating until we become a hydra, writhing with 100 hissing heads poised to strike. But the harder I try to inhabit this idea, the more I know of its futility. Eventually, each head will be sliced off, tar black blood kissing the hilt of my sword. I'll need to cauterize each wound to prevent our dreams from regrowing, distractions from the real magic that makes us powerful on our own.
There aren't any kids in here, are there? We're kid free? Okay, so I'm gonna read dick pics. Okay. 2 dicks sitting in my daughter's inbox, like men without hats, waiting for any door to open. Sighting a stranger's penis used to be rare. Remember raincoats? Like a flash of lightning, like a scratch and win ticket. Sometimes glittering knockoff watches. Sometimes a flapping penis, shivering in the electric air. Overcooked hot dog? Aborted fetus? Close-up of a thumb? Rolled bologna on a lonely deli plate? We have whole monologues for vaginas, but I can only imagine a penis as silent, which isn't the same as listening. The lighting is never good. No one ever drapes a dick in folds of linen, with the head looking back, one pearl earring shining in stilled patience. In the schoolyard, a graffitied cock stands on balls, pointing to the night sky, a fallen constellation. Women are for portraits, lounging nudes stuffed into frames, luminous and arch, their heads, breasts, ass, and feet, though never speech. You must pay and cross a velvet rope to see them. The penis stands alone, in filthy bars and bathrooms, in wooded parks, in the shadowed alleys, whistling a moon-white tune. Now penises are everywhere, like posters for a one-act play, plastered on every telephone pole, bench, building, on every mailbox, on your kitchen chair, so that you have to push through piles of them, great snowdrifts of dick, just to reach across the room and tuck a stray hair back into your daughter's braid.
Okay, so I have to say the washroom here is clean of dicks. Yeah, none. Unfortunately, this is slowly coming to an end. So it's been a real delight, a real pleasure, and thank you, BookFest.
Thank you so much, Dorothy, and everybody. So thank you to Dorothy for her beautiful moderation. Sarah Tsiang, David Lee, Luke Hathaway.
Thanks for joining us. Look for more episodes of All Right in Sin City wherever you listen to podcasts, or check out our website, allrightinsincity.com. For information and announcements of new podcasts, sign up to our email list or follow us on Facebook and Twitter.